Well, they may be planning to starve the country, and if you don't think they can do it, I want to tell you exactly how they can. Good morning. Welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith, and how are you today? I hope you're well. That's what I want to talk about. Before we get into that, if you are with us on Patreon, by the way, the new chat feature over there is going great. Every day I'll start it off. It allows Patreon members to chat and talk and ask questions, or just express themselves throughout the whole day. Every day I start off with something, and recently I've started off with questions. Yesterday it was what got you started into preparedness, and today, and that was just great. We had some very, very interesting answers there. And today my question over there was, what advice would you give people just now starting their preparedness journey? And we've already had some great contributions. If you're with us on Patreon, make sure you check that chat every day. It's not yet available on the browser platform, but if you go to Patreon through the app, it is. And the browser is coming. It will be coming. It's working out really well. I'm really happy with it. Make sure you check it. If you're not with us on Patreon, we invite you to come over and be a member with us there. You get so much more there, and the link is down below. I put so much more on Patreon than I put on YouTube. You'll be glad that you did. And if you're on the Stonemont level, well, I'll interject this here. Remember that this and all of my videos are brought to you by the Stonemont series, my books. I wrote them, yeah. The complete 6 novels, the complete plan on how to prepare for, survive, and rebuild after a complete collapse of everything. The reversion, the revival, the renewal, and appeal to heaven, blessings of freedom, and hostages to fortune. That's also it's available through Amazon. If you want them fast, you get them through Amazon. If you want them signed by me, you can get them through our website, stonemont.us, and that link is also down below. If you're with us at the Stonemont level on the Patreon side, we're now up to, I'm reading the audibles of the entire series. We're now up to, I think, chapter 12 of the revival. And I'll be doing the next chapter after I get done with this. So if you like that kind of thing, and you like to follow along with Audible books, those are now available through our Patreon page. Okay, how they're going to starve the country. The reason that I wanted to talk about this is because I think we're all familiar with the concern that our food supplies are being slowly being put under more control. We've seen shortages. We've seen the destruction of food plants. We've seen the buying up of farmland by, the control oligarchs. We see so much being put into our food. We see very, very questionable additives now, even more than all the preservatives that we've had to deal with throughout the years. Essentially, we're being killed by the stuff that's being put in our food and our water, slowly. But recently, we know of greater concerns. I can't say it here, but probably most of you know what I'm talking about. The things that are being added to the meat sources. Okay. All right. So we know that there is that concern. And if you're at all involved in preparedness, hopefully you are involved in the production of your own food. The first step that most preppers go to is the stocking of food, and you should. You should stock food for as long as you can. I always say for 7 years. I've talked about why before. I won't get into that now, but stock for as long as you can. But realize that the only purpose of your stocked food is to keep you alive until you're able to produce all the food you need. Okay? Some people who simply won't put the energy into it will tell you that's impossible. It's not impossible. Plenty of people do it. Okay, it's a matter of wanting to. It's a matter of learning how to do it, and then it's a matter of doing it. But other things have been thrown into the mix here lately. You've heard about the 15-minute cities. You know that they're trying to get everybody to move into the cities because people in the cities are more dependent on central government than people in the country. Well, not as much as, well, there's not that much disparity nowadays as there used to be. 60, 70 years ago, people who lived in the country were much more independent than those who lived in the cities. Nowadays, many people who live in the countries are just as dependent on the food supply system as the people in the cities. Not all. There are plenty out there who are independent, but there's not the disparity that there used to be. Where do you think of the people in the city depend on food deliveries every day to be able to go to the store, and the people in the outlying areas are more independent and never have to rely on anybody else? And that's simply not true. As the control becomes more and more, and I know, by the way, if you're new to this, I am not one of these that gets all excited and yells and screams and tells you how horrible things are going to be. It couldn't be more serious than it is, but we prefer here on this channel to talk about it reasonably. Okay, and I assume that I'm dealing with people that want to learn. By the way, I should interject this here. I just put up one on the Patreon channel. And like I say, there's a lot of stuff over there. And there's a lot of stuff that I put up there that I don't put on YouTube simply because many reasons. I put one up over there about fast draw. Is it practical or just tactical? And so if you're interested in those types of things, Patreon is where you'll find it. So anyway, we've talked about how they will control the people through food. We know that. Okay. There was a statement, however, several statements. So I'm not focusing on one individual because I think that this is an opinion that's shared by many, many people. And it was comments on, I don't know, several videos ago, and they said, well, good luck if they try to attempt that in the country. People will rise up, or don't they know that the food production is all outside the cities, and the power generation is all outside the cities? Don't they know that? They'll never be able to control the country. And I want to warn you about that, that misleading thought. Okay, let me take a sip here. First off, if you study those times in history where a government has controlled the food and starved their people out, many of you are familiar with the Holodomor in Ukraine. I'm more familiar with the Irish famine. It's called the famine. It's back in the 1840s. It was what brought many of our ancestors over from Ireland. And it's called the famine. It wasn't a famine. It was a starvation. It was a genocide. It was a matter of the British, the English, who had occupied Ireland, and the Irish raised, who were an agrarian, kind of a very independent type of society, that kind of society many people here want to go back to. There were many in the cities, of course, but there were many in the country who raised the food. Well, they raised a lot of food, but the English took the food and wanted to sell it, ship it back to England, or sell it as a profit because of the big landowners. They could do that, and most of the Irish didn't. They weren't allowed to own their own land. They were tenants on it, and the English got to the point, and some of you may know this. Banshee knows this. If you're with us on Patreon, you'll see his name pop up every now and then. The English finally said, well, these Irish, they're eating too much of the food, and that's cutting into our profits. So they imported the potato. Everybody thinks that the potato came from Ireland. It didn't come from Ireland. It was shipped over there. It was not indigenous to Ireland. It was shipped over there from Americas, and it was given them as the food source for the Irish people, so that they'd stop eating all of the good food that they were raising, that the English were taking for export or profit. Okay, that's it in a nutshell. Well, people have asked, and as a result, 1 million Irish starved. Okay, they starved to death. If you want to see a good movie on that, Black 47. It's either on Tubi or it's on Netflix. I reviewed that once before, quite a while back. Black 47. Watch that. Very good. But anyway, 1 million Irish died of starvation. thousands with what was called the green mouth, trying to eat grass to stay alive. And the English did that on purpose. I'm sorry, it's the way it is. Every nationality, every group has done horrible things against other groups. The English aren't unique in that. We've done it. Whatever group you're in, you've done it. Okay, and then you've also probably been the victim of it throughout history. That's history. So that they were able to do that, and people will ask, well, how were they able to do that? Why didn't the people rise up? Well, because the English, they had very, very competent law enforcement and police powers right there. Okay, they guarded those trains. The people never came together, even though the Irish, they love fighting more than they love drinking. I say that as a person who's part Irish, okay? And it's kind of a joke, but the Irish love to fight. So it's not like you couldn't get them to fight. You couldn't get them to rise up. And they never rose up. They might have risen up individually, but they never rose up at the same time with a common purpose. The Celtic people have only arisen twice to overthrow oppressors, and that's throughout history. But they didn't come together and rise up, and that's a lesson that we need to remember. People will say, well, the country people will rise up. No, they won't. Show me a time that they have. They simply won't do it. But the English were able to take all the food out of the countryside and from the people who grew it. Why were they able to do that? And that was before technology. Now we live in a time of technology. So I want to address this idea that they wouldn't be able to starve the country people out because food production and energy is in the country. Well, food production, for the most part, is in corporate farms. What comes from the idea of the little family farm, where they grow some crops and, have some cattle and sheep and things like that. Very small, hardly any of the major food production comes from the family farm. And most family farms, if they have a little family farm, many times the people still have a job in town or a job doing something else. And they just kind of tend that because that's been the way of their family for a couple of generations. Excuse me. But these family farms is not where most of the food production is. The food production comes from the huge corporate farms that are great, or they're raising one or two crops and, GMO. And then shipped and processed and all. And a lot of the food, of course, that we eat in the United States comes from other places, South America, many different places. They have complete control over that. And there's no way that the people in the country, they might be able to sustain themselves, okay. And that's good. You should. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. But if they want to starve the people out, well, let me back up. But you see, that's the food production that people are talking about. They say, well, I'd like to see them stop that because food production is in the country. Yes, but they control it. And you have to understand that. They control it. They can control it not just with people, but with technology. And you know the technology that I'm talking about. And if you don't, look into acoustic crowd control and drone technology and things like that. If they want to lock down all food production, all major, I'll put it that way, major food production in the country, they can. And if they want to, they will. Same thing with power generation. Okay, take for example, a lot of the electricity that was supplied in this area comes from the Wolf Creek nuclear facility down in Wolf Creek, Kansas. Okay. They can, it's out in the middle of the country, but they can secure that easily. They can secure that. Don't think that a bunch of small town guys and farmers are all going to rise up and take over that nuclear facility and distribute that electricity to their neighbors. That's not how it works. That's not going to happen. In southern Missouri, a lot of it is from dams. Okay, you got Bagnell Dam at Lake of the Ozarks. You got Table Rock Dam. A lot of the hydroelectric power comes out of there. You might think of those as being, even though they're tourist places now, they're kind of small town, semi-rural. They could easily be secured. Okay, the people of Branson, Missouri, are not going to rise up and take over the dam and resupply all of their neighbors. Hi, buddy, come on in. My son's getting back in a break from school. They're not going to do that. That's not going to happen. They can easily secure those places. So this idea that the people in the country can never be controlled is one of those prepper fantasies, I think, that is so common and can be so destructive because they're misleading. And I'm going to do one in the future, a video on prepper fantasies. The problem with a fantasy is that it's fun to think about, but it takes you out of reality. And when you're talking about your survival, you need to be in reality, because not being in reality is a death sentence. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that the small, individual, family, or group can't sustain themselves. Basic sustenance with growing food, and that's a little more difficult than most people think. If you haven't done it, I'd suggest, get to know people who have, or try to do it yourself, and you'll see how difficult it is. And also, here is where, and I don't have time to get into this in detail right now, but I will in a future one. People have been thinking about food in the wrong way when it comes to providing food in the future for themselves, or even now. And I'll just leave that there. Okay, I'll say that it is not all about calories. Leave it there. I know that's what you've heard. All this about calories. No, it's not. Right now, somebody's banging out on their keyboard. Yes, it is. I heard somebody say it was all about calories. Hang on half a second. Okay, those of you who have been with me before know that anytime one of my kids comes home, I always stop this and I talk to them. No, it's not about calories. I'll do another one on that. But it's possible for people on a small level to produce what they need. Now, that's not exactly everything they want. Okay, your needs are much different than wants, and needs means what keeps you alive. So yes, it would be possible if a person has an operation, a farming operation, that is diversified. Okay. If you have all of those things, if you have meat, and that's what you should concentrate on. Far too many people concentrate on the grains and the vegetables and things like this. That's easy. I mean, you garden those, right? There's a difference between raising plants and animals. I'll get into that on a second one. I suggest you concentrate more on the animals. But most people can't. Most people, they have a big garden, and that's good if that's all you can do. But while the individual family, or perhaps several families or small community, might be able to keep things going, to provide things for themselves during, whatever, a takeover as a result of a collapse. If the powers want to shut them down, they can and they will. Don't be misled that they can't, or that they won't. They will, and they can and they will. So what to do? That's the question. What to do? Well, here's where you have to start thinking about going underground. And I don't necessarily mean living underground. I mean being able to do things that the powers aren't aware of. I put it that way. If you, those of you who have been with us on Patreon know that I've talked extensively about organized crime. Maybe I'll get back to that again. As a living in a parallel economy, an underground economy. Yeah, sure, that gets into bartering and everything like that. But to the extent that you are visible to the powers, you're vulnerable to the powers. Does that make sense? Okay. So you have to start thinking about what you can do when they want to shut everything down. And you may not be the first. The cities are where they're going to control it, but they're going to be shipping. See, they're going to be shipping all the food from all the corporate farms to the people in the cities because they want people in the cities. They want them in the cities where they can be controlled. That means it's not coming to your grocery store anymore if you live in two corners wherever. Okay? Not happening. The food you're going to have is the food that you're growing. Whether you're trading to your neighbor down the block or down the road, a couple miles down the road for something else. So, as always, I don't like to put out all of the answers for several reasons. First off, think for yourself. Okay, too often, like even when I say you got to find ways to make money, and people say, "Well, I can't think of any way to make money. Tell me some ways to make money." Well, if I have to tell it to you, you're not going to do well because that's part of it. That's so much of it. Okay, 80% is the creativity for you to figure it out. And secondly, I'm not going to give away all my secret information. Okay, it's mine. It's the way I do it. Not putting everything out here. You think about it. You figure it out. Talk to your friends. What if it all collapses and they try to control all of what we're doing? Sit around, talk about it, brainstorm it. Okay, if you've got a group, make that a subject for your group. I'll be really interested to hear what the people on Patreon have to say about this. Because we have, again, I'm gonna throw this in here. If you're not with us on Patreon, you ought to be, because we have such a group over there, a large group, very large group, of people with great experience, great breadth and depth of experience. And they have a lot to say. They have a lot to teach. And for people who want to learn, that's the place to be. And the time, if you're not, if you haven't learned as much as you need to, which none of us have, you need to be in a place where you can learn. Step outside the fantasy about, country boy will survive, and step into the reality of, hey, we have people in this world with resources beyond what we can even imagine that may try to control us. And we'd better start thinking about it and get in and step out of the fantasy and get into the reality of what if it happens. What do I do? How do I feed myself and my kids? That's your job to figure out. That's your assignment for today. All right? Okay, get to thinking about it, because the time to start thinking about it is not when it's at your doorstep. It's now. Okay. All right. Hey, remember, this was brought to you by the Stonemont series. If you haven't read them, you need to get them. Amazon or through our website, stonemont.us. Links are down below. Love to have you on Patreon. You will learn a lot. And remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. And the first step of preparing for a real situation is to think about the real situation being real. Okay? Y'all have a good day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.